Assalamualaikum. My name is Rizwan Ahmed. I am a CEO of Magento Developer.net. Now we live in modern world. Now things should change fast in modern world. Now Magento 1 changed to Magento 2. Now every Magento developer keep in mind that Magento 2 is so complex. That's why we have changed the method of learning for Magento developers. Now learn Magento 2 in 2 days with our MDD Magento developer documentation and video lesson. Now just follow the steps on each topic instead of finding the solution for each problem. Now learn Magento 2 with us by using the modern way of learning. Right now, download our MDD Magento developer documentation. Visit our site at www.magentodeveloper.net. Let's start working with MDD. Open home.html page into the browser. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to install Magento 2. Click on this link, Magento 2 installation. Click on screenshot of the step 1. Now you can see that our step 1 open into Lightbox. Click on download Magento 2. Go back to our documentation. Click on next step of the documentation. Step 2. Go to section full release. Zip with no sample data. Select your format. Click on download. Go back to our download site. Here you can see the section full release zip with no sample data. Select your format. Click on download. I already download Magento 2. Click on next step of the documentation. Step 3. Extract download file. Extract download file. Please wait. Copy and paste this extracted file into our htdocs folder. Copy this folder. Go to our installation of XAMPP. Then click on htdocs folder. Paste here. Click on next step of the documentation. Please wait. Step 4. After copy and paste file into htdocs folder, rename it with Magento 2- installation. Rename this folder with Magento 2- installation. Click on next step of the documentation. Step 5. Start XAMPP. Click on XAMPP control panel. Click on Start Apache. Click on Start MySQL. Now you can see that our Apache and MySQL running successfully with background color green. That's good. Click on next step of the documentation. Step 6. After starting Apache and MySQL, go to our installation path. Copy this URL, paste and go here. Go back to our documentation, click on agree and set up Magento. Go back to our installation, click on agree and set up Magento. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, step 7. Just click on start readiness check. Go back to our installation, click on start readiness check. We have some error. You need to resolve these issues to continue. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, step 8. First, we need to fix these 3 errors. Just click on next step of the documentation, step 9. Go to XAMPP, then PHP folder. Go to XAMPP, then PHP folder. Inside the PHP folder, find php.ini file. Open this php.ini file. Click on next step of the documentation. Step 10. Press Ctrl plus F in php.ini file. Copy this. Press Ctrl F. Press Ctrl V. Click on find next. Remove column from start. Copy this. Go back to our php.ini file. Press Ctrl F. Press Ctrl V. Click on find next. Click on OK. Click on up. Find again. Click on find next. Remove column. Copy this. Go back to our php.ini file. Press Ctrl F. Press Ctrl V. Click on find next. Remove column from start. Click on save this file. Close this file. Click on next step of the documentation. Step 11. Stop Apache. Stop Apache. Stop MySQL. Close XAMPP. Also quit from the taskbar. Click on next step of the documentation. Step 12. Start XAMPP. Click on XAMPP control panel. Click on start Apache. Click on start MySQL. Now you can see that our Apache and MySQL running successfully with background color green. That's good. Click on next step of the documentation. After start Apache and MySQL, click on try again. Go back to our installation. Click on try again. Completed. Now you can move on to the next step. Go back to our documentation. Click on next step of the documentation. Now you can see that we have fixed all problems. Click on next now. Go back to our installation. Click on next. Go back to our documentation. Click on next step of the documentation. Step 15. First we need to create database. Go to this URL.
copy this URL, paste and go here. Now you can see that our phpMyAdmin open. That's good. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, click on databases, enter the database name Magento 2-installation, click on create. Go back to our phpMyAdmin, click on databases, enter database name Magento 2-installation, click on create. Now you can see that we have created a database for our Magento 2 installation. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, set the value like this, enter the database name. In my case I am using Magento 2-installation, click on next. Okay, go back to our phpMyAdmin, first copy server name, go back to our installation, database server host this, go back to our phpMyAdmin, copy database name, go back to our installation, enter database name, click on next. Close phpMyAdmin now. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, enter login address as admin only, click on next. Go back to our installation, enter Magento admin address as admin only, click on next. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, just click on next. Go back to our installation, just click on next. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, step 20. Fill all these fields, click on next. Go back to our installation, enter username admin, enter email address info@Magento Developer.net, password confirm password, click on next. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, step 21, just click on install now. Go back to our installation, click on install now. Please wait. Now you can see that our installation starting. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, step 22. Now our Magento 2 installation is started. Just wait until it's completed. It's take time, please wait. Go back to our installation, please wait. Okay, that's good. Now you can see that our Magento installation successfully completed. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, step 23. Now you can see that our Magento 2 installation completed successfully. Click on these two links one by one. Go back to our installation, click these two links one by one. Okay, that's good. Now you can see that our home page working properly. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation. First time maybe it's load like this screenshot, just press Ctrl plus F5 and refresh, then it's working properly. Click on next step of the documentation, step 25. You can see that it's working properly. Enjoy working with our MDD Magento Developer documentation. Click on next step of the documentation, step 26. This URL is our admin section. First time maybe it's load like this screenshot, just press Ctrl plus F5 and refresh, then it's working properly. Go to our admin URL, you can see that there is a error, just press Ctrl plus F5. Okay, that's good. Now you can see that our admin loading successfully. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, step 27. Now you can see that our admin loading successfully. Enter username and password, click on sign in. Go back to our admin URL, enter username, enter password. Click on sign in. Okay, that's good. Now you can see that we are logged into admin section of the Magento 2. Go back to our documentation, click on next step of the documentation, step 28. Now you can see that we are logged into admin section of the Magento 2. Enjoy working with our MDD Magento Developer documentation. Go back to our admin section, click and check the working. It's working properly. We are using the modern way of learning Magento 2.
What benefit by using the modern way of learning? In modern world, time is our money. MDD save lot of time of Magento developer in learning Magento. Increase the speed of productivity of Magento developer. Improve self-confidence of Magento developer. Follow us. Do not forget subscribe our channel. Visit our site at www.magentodeveloper.net.